Right. Hi, everyone. Very nice to have you here. Today, I wanted to introduce Nicholas Albanese, who is the Regional Associate Director for University of Rochester, and he's here representing the West Coast region. So welcome, Nick. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to be here to really share your insights and thoughts, with our audience.
Thanks so much, Pooja. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I was thinking that maybe you could begin with just telling our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe how you found your way to University of Rochester. We'd love to hear about our speakers.
Sure. So I started in admissions actually as a tour guide I went to a small Catholic university in New England, and I was working in the admissions office, giving tours, and it was getting close to graduation time. I was a psychology major, and I enjoyed the courses, but I didn't have a ton of opportunity to practice or apply what I was learning in a real way. And I wasn't so sure if I wanted to study psychology in graduate school, but I was able to have an internship in the admissions office. And I realized that people who work in admissions, we all have different backgrounds. There's no major for that. So there were people in the office that were theater majors. In fact, our vice president, my former institution, was a theater major. We had people that were business majors and psychology majors like me. So it was so fun to see everyone's skills and what they had to bring to the table. And I loved the work. I loved working with families and that balance of being social and promoting a place that I loved working and going to at that time with some of those, travel analysis and planning skills and those kinds of things. So I interned in the admissions office. I fell in love. They offered me a job right after graduation, and that was back in 2012. And then I met my partner and now husband in about a year after that, and he got into graduate school in Seattle. So we actually moved out to the Seattle area, and I became the first regional admissions counselor for that university, and learned what it meant to work remotely, and learning about the Northwest and the West Coast as a territory and some of the nuances there. I didn't know what Running Start was before I moved to Seattle, and and learning more about IB programs and that kind of thing, and those wonderful opportunities. And then we moved down to San Diego about 2 years ago, and the opportunity came to work for Rochester. And I was so excited because it was a chance to apply all the skills that I had been learning for a university with a mission that I believed in, but a university that also had a little bit more name recognition on the West Coast. And so, being able to feel very busy interacting with students and families throughout the cycle, throughout the year, and still going to areas where we maybe are not as known, but we also have those areas where we are known. So it's fun to have that balance. And it's been a thrill working for Rochester. I just completed my first full year working for the university. And so I still have the Northwest as a territory. So I fly up there a few times a year. So it's wonderful to kind of, still have some of those roots up there in the Pacific Northwest, while also having a little more sun. Admittedly, I am enjoying the sun down in San Diego. So I miss the mountains, but I'll take the sun.
That's amazing. And and I think what's also amazing is that many of us who started with admissions, that was not really our plan going in, right? And so yes, later on in the segment, we will be talking a little bit more about, how amazing. I mean, I know University of Rochester has allows students lots of freedom into the curriculum, but I know we're skipping ahead. But I mean, similarly to your story, I started with the Office of Admissions as well when I was a student. And I know how I quickly fell in love with, interacting with students and, helping to advocate for them. And, that was just such a great experience that I said, who needs to do investment banking? Because that's what I was studying when I can do this for the rest of my life, right? And it's been 20 years for me. So I
Wonderful.
absolutely hear you. Yeah, I absolutely hear you, and where you're coming from. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, right? So, maybe let's begin with really, for students who are here on the West Coast, who are thinking about, do we want to move to the East Coast, and maybe they haven't had a chance to visit. They probably, for those who are interested on, in the East Coast, they've maybe looked at, NYU or a couple of other schools up in Massachusetts. So can you maybe begin by just sharing with our audience, what are the top 2 or 3 things that University of Rochester has to offer and why students should consider coming to Rochester, to begin with?
Yes. When I think about Rochester, one of the first things that comes to mind is the way that we blend the undergraduate experience with all of the opportunities we have at the graduate level. I think we do that unlike many other institutions. So the undergraduate experience at Rochester feels like almost like a small liberal arts college. I mean, we do have 6,000 undergraduates, so it's technically medium size. So it's not going to be 2,000 or 3,000 students, but it feels like a smaller liberal arts kind of experience. 75% of our classes have under 30 students. In the classes where we have lecture halls, we work to make sure that those classes feel like smaller classes. So, you have the main lecture that is taught by the professor, the person doing the research. Then you have another section of the class taught by a TA. Usually it's a graduate student, maybe someone getting their PhD in that subject that works with the professor. Maybe they're in their lab as well. And they can kind of go over the homework, and it's a smaller group. And then we have sort of like a third thing where students work in small groups, maybe 5 or 6 of them together, and they work on a project and they sort of learn from each other. So if you think about the benefits of being in small class, being able to raise your hand, ask questions, get hands-on with the learning, not just have scantrons and that kind of thing, we are able to emulate that in the classroom experience. Other benefits to a small liberal arts college, I think about the Career Services Center and doing things like having grants so that if a student has an internship that's maybe unpaid, you can kind of go to that internship coordinator and say, hey, you don't even have to pay me because Rochester's going to give me a grant to cover my living expenses. We also have alumni all over the world, and this is one of the main things that I would mention about Rochester as well as our global community. We have 180 countries represented. We have all 50 states. So when you graduate, the alumni live everywhere, and many of them agree to be mentors to our students. We call them our Meliora mentors. And so, maybe you want to work in investment banking, you want to move to, New York City. We probably have an alumni that's doing that. Or maybe you want to live in London and do a similar thing there. We probably have an alumni there as well. So, we do a lot of these things that small liberal arts colleges do. The other couple of things I'll mention with that is the flexibility of our curriculum. And this is another one of the main things I've mentioned. This ties in with the small liberal arts kind of feel, where you can customize your major. You can even create your own major at Rochester. We have a multidisciplinary study center. Every year, students are coming up with new things. Astrophysics is one example that comes to mind. Students putting the pieces together from different programs. You have the ability to double major for many of our students. Over half of our students double major because we have a flexible curriculum. So we don't require courses outside of your major except for one writing class, but there's like 200 options there, all kinds of fun themes. There's been a Taylor Swift theme in the past, a Harry Potter theme, that kind of thing, but helping students to ground them in that research education. So we've got that small liberal arts feel. I think we do that really well. But on top of that, we're a tier 1 research university. So, we have the highest level of federal funding for grants. We're in the top 15 universities in the US for citation impact. So if you're looking at a peer-reviewed article, chances are one of those professors or people that are cited in the article, does research at Rochester. When we hire faculty, we actually require that they teach undergraduates. And so your professors, as a freshman in your classes, typically, this is someone who is teaching you, you're learning from them, you're working with them, you're probably in a smaller class environment with them. But they're also someone that's doing research. They have grants, they're running a lab, they're working with graduate students. And so about 80% of our undergraduates get involved in research. And I think a big part of that is because they're making those connections so early on. And because we have a lot of mentorship and support, whether that's funding, we have grants to cover living expenses for research over the summer. Students can actually even get a research grant during the application process. If we see that students are so into research, we can actually give them some research funds right off the bat. And it's up to them how they use that money throughout the 4 years. If they want to buy equipment, if they maybe want to buy a laptop, whatever they need that money for, we trust them. So I think we blend that small caring environment with the resources and the amazing educational opportunities of being at the highest level of research as an institution, with being a sort of global community with students from all over the world. We have almost 28 active religions on campus. We have so many different multicultural associations and groups. So when you walk down the hallway in your residence hall, you hear different languages, you're interacting with different cultures and backgrounds and identities. So the global community, the interesting blend of liberal arts and research, and the flexible curriculum, I would say are three really unique things about Rochester that make us a special place and make us a place worth checking out if those are things that you're interested in as a student.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds incredible. And I know I put you on the spot because I was like, give me three, right? And, having said that, there is, another program that I want us to talk about as well. But before we just do that, I just wanted to underscore, Nick, two things that you mentioned that really stood out to me. One is, that statistic of 80% of this, almost 80% of undergraduate students getting involved with research. And I think that number is huge, right? I know a lot of colleges will talk about undergraduate research, but really, having this dedication to allowing students to be able to do that. And I think that number is really big. So especially, and I know University of Rochester also has, does an excellent job with like students who want to do pre-med and who want to get into research. And I so just wanted to underscore that for students who are especially thinking about these fields, right? I think University of Rochester is a fantastic place to be able to do that, right? So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I also wanted to, that if you could talk a little bit more about, and you did mention a little bit more about this, about this as well, which is the fact that the university doesn't require a set core curriculum, right? They don't need gen ed or general education requirements. And as you mentioned, students have to take like one writing course and that's pretty much it, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, and especially how,
Absolutely.
yeah, especially how students have maybe combined, two programs or two majors that seem really different, and how have they combined it and really charted their own path through this?
Yeah. So when we think about our curriculum, there's all kinds of curriculums at the university level. And you mentioned the gen eds, and I think that's probably the most standard model that most students are used to. So maybe you have 2 math, 2 science, 2 art classes, regardless of whatever your major is. And that goal is to make you a well-rounded student. And that's a fine way to do that, to do things. I think that works for a lot of students. That kind of curriculum worked really well for me, with the college that I went to. I think I really needed that. I needed a little bit of, kind of some guidelines there, because of curriculum that's a little more flexible isn't for every kind of student. I think it's for students that would really thrive with that flexibility. Students who are so passionate about something that they want to double up on electives. They want to fill their schedule. They're really intentional about what they want to study, or students that maybe are a little more undecided, but they do have 2 or 3 areas that they're really interested in. And they want to be able to pull in a lot of classes from those different areas. So I think for the student that doesn't have as much of an interest in a certain topic yet, it's not that they can't do well with our kind of curriculum, but I think, it makes sense to look at those schools where there is more of that, kind of, there's those guidelines in place, more of that, kind of standard kind of curriculum. But for our students, I think they are so passionate about the topics that they want to study that that's having our curriculum and our research kind of experience, and the funding and mentorship and support to study what they care about are the big selling points for Rochester. So in the 90s, our students, faculty, and staff came together and said, we used to have more of that traditional core curriculum, and we said, well, we need to rethink this because it's not allowing the kind of creativity. Some of our departments are a little bit siloed and cut off. We want to create more cross collaboration. So basically, we took all of our subjects and we put them into 3 categories or buckets, let's call them. We have natural science and engineering, or basically the STEM bucket. The social sciences, so things like psychology, business, and so on, and the humanities. And basically, the requirements to graduate and to get your undergraduate degree at Rochester, you choose a major in one of those buckets, and virtually all our majors fall into one of those buckets. There's a few majors that are actually cross-listed, and you can kind of choose what bucket it falls into. You take one writing class. There's over 200 options typically for that class, and that's not going to be enough credits to graduate. You need 120 credits to graduate. Most majors are going to get you maybe 70, 80% of the way. So that remaining gap, rather than having you take some gen ed courses to fill that gap, we really leave it up to the students. We do give them some guidelines, but they're not as rigid as a sort of a school has a core curriculum. So we basically say, okay, take at least 3 courses in the 2 other buckets. And rather than have you just kind of look at the thousands of classes that are offered and choose what classes to take, you might feel a little bit lost or have trouble doing that. We looked at all of our courses across the entire curriculum, and we decided to group them by themes. So we have this thing at Rochester called a cluster, and this is a pretty unique thing to Rochester. And we take 3 courses that are linked by a theme. They can be from different departments, but they're within that same bucket, that same category. So they might be classes in psychology, business, and maybe a third area, but that's all in that social science bucket, or classes in philosophy and archaeology and classic civilizations, but that's all in that humanities bucket. So you have a major, 2 clusters or 3 classes, each outside of your major. So it's 6 classes outside of your major total, a writing class, and those are the basic requirements to graduate. Within that, we actually don't read by major, we don't admit by major. And when you're admitted to Rochester, you are admitted to art, science, and engineering, and you can take courses in any of those subjects. So I think that's a big draw for West Coast students when they're used to some of the state systems, where it is a bit more rigid. Maybe they do admit by major. I know in your area in the Northwest, you have computer science is a big one that's very challenging and competitive. And not that it's not with us, but we don't admit by major. So there's no limits or capacity constraints on computer science, for example, or any of our engineering programs. So you can switch into them, you can change your mind. So no one actually declares a major at Rochester until their 2nd year. So when you apply, you can indicate what majors you're interested in, up to 2. That will help your advisor, if you choose to enroll at Rochester, to determine your courses and work with you to figure out your schedule. And you'll start taking those courses from day 1. And if you are interested in engineering, you'll have a specific engineering advisor. And as long as you pass those courses, you will join the major in your sophomore year. So there's no capacity constraints, there's no entrance exams or tests or anything like that. You just have to pass the prerequisite courses to declare the major. And you can take courses outside of your major in any area as long as you have the prerequisite classes. So the cluster is just the minimum. Some students elevate that cluster to a minor, so they turn 3 classes into 6. Some students double major, and they take those 6 classes and turn them into 10 to 12, however many classes that second major requires. And in that case, you don't have to take clusters because you're already taking so many other courses outside of your major. Some other things that I think are kind of unique with choosing the classes is that research can be for credits. You can either do research for pay, or it could actually be for credit. The research can be done at Rochester or it can be done abroad. You can pull in classes from studying abroad into your major as well. So maybe you have some upperclassmen electives and you want to take them somewhere else. And maybe there's a topic that you really want to learn about and you don't see it within the thousands of classes in our course guidelines. You can either take that class somewhere else and with approval from the department chair, or you might even be able to do research and teach yourself the topic, because even if it's not a class that's being taught, maybe there just wasn't enough demand for that specific topic. Being a tier one research university, we have faculty, pretty large departments, and we have faculty that probably could mentor that research interest. They may have studied it themselves, even though they're not teaching a class on it. And so you can really study just about anything at Rochester. And that, I think, is the magic of the place. You can take your academic interests as far as you want to take them. So if you want to kind of follow the standard path, take the courses that are in your major, choose some of the concentrations and electives, kind of go along with what is offered, you can absolutely do that. But if you have really specific ideas and you want to forge your own path, you have the kind of mentorship and support and resources to pursue those interests. And so it's almost like being a graduate student as an undergraduate in some ways. I think it's kind of one of the cool things about it. But I'm kind of rambling, so I'll try to pull myself back. I just get excited talking about this, but
No, absolutely. And I can see why you would get excited about this, right? Like the freedom to really design your own major and fall back on enough support. You know that you have this support net waiting for you. I think that is, incredible. And I think another thing that is, also very unique to University of Rochester is the Take Five, the scholarship program or the scholars program that you have, right? Where I know, and from what I understand, that, a certain number of students, actually, why don't I let you explain what that is?
sure.
Right. They have this incredible opportunity that, to be honest, I haven't heard any other school really offer. So I want you to be able to share that with our students and families as well.
Absolutely. So, I mentioned that if you have an idea, we will support it. If you want to study something, if you want to learn about something, we'll support it. And we will support it while you're a current student. And for the Take Five students, we're actually supporting you studying that idea after graduating. So let me give you an example of what Take Five might be for. Let's say you're that engineering student. Engineering, if you're doing an ABET accredited program, there's a lot of required courses, many more than a typical major. And so, let's say you're a mechanical engineering major, you already are going past the 120 credits when you graduate. So we don't require 2 clusters, we just require 1 outside of your major. And there's just so many classes that you have to take. You will be able to fit them all in. You're going to graduate in 4 years. You'll still be able to have experiences like studying abroad if you want to do that, but you don't have as much opportunity to fully dive into multiple subjects outside of engineering that are very different than engineering. So let's say, and this is actually an example that I've heard from students, maybe you are like a biomedical engineering major, and you're going to be working on, genetic modifications, CRISPR, and that kind of thing. And maybe you did your cluster in the social sciences, but you didn't really have a lot of chance to take humanities classes. They just didn't fit into your schedule. And before you, start modifying DNA and working, I was not a science person, by the way, so hopefully I'm explaining this okay. But before working in that field, when you graduate, you want to learn something about philosophy. You want to think about that. You want to think about what it means to be human, and what are the moral implications and ethical implications of the work that you're going to be doing. So we've had students in that situation, and so the Take Five program allows you to put a proposal together where you say, I want to study something that I did not have an opportunity to study as an undergraduate. And we will allow the student to stay for a semester or even up to a year, tuition free after graduating. So this is not to get another degree or a credential. It's just taking classes to enrich yourself. Maybe you feel that it's useful for your future career or just for life, but there's something that you didn't get a chance to study. And before you go into the real world, whether that's graduate school or a career, that you want to have a little more time to explore that topic. So we have the Take Five program for students that have that academic area they want to explore. We also have a program called the E5 program, or the Entrepreneurial Fifth Year, for students that have an entrepreneurial idea they want to explore. So we will help to incubate that idea. Students, again, they have to put a proposal together and be accepted into this program. But basically, students will say, you know, this is my idea. These are the resources that I'd like to use on campus. Maybe it's the supercomputers, maybe it's the knowledge of the faculty, or the 3D printers, or whatever it may be. And the faculty will say, okay, you know, we think that we can support this idea. We will mentor this idea. So, you know, students can engage with the AIM Center for Entrepreneurship throughout their 4 years. But this allows them to kind of give it a chance, you know, before they go out to the working world, to try actually launching that idea on their own, with support, of course. But you know, so I think these are two unique programs that really show how we are so passionate about our students exploring their interests even after they graduate. We want them to be in an environment that's empowering and inspiring, and where they can follow their dreams wherever that takes them.
And that's amazing, right? And I hope our families heard that loud and clear, that this extra year, or extra semester for the program, for the scholars program, is actually tuition free, right? I again just wanted to make this loud and clear, to families. So you're really seeing that level of support. It's not just namesake, right? They're really invested in doing this. And now I feel like I'm doing a marketing spiel for, the city of Rochester, right? And that's how amazing everything is, right? That the university is offering. So I think I'm getting swept away as well.
Oh.
But yeah, no, this is all really great. Thank you for sharing all this. I do have 2 or 3 more questions. And I think one more maybe just about the major. And then I want us to move a little bit into the student life and trying to understand a little bit more about that. Like, what does it really mean to study and be a student? But before we get into that, is there, maybe can you just share with us what are some of the most popular majors? And I know you said students don't have to declare this until later on in sophomore year, right? But what are some of the majors, most popular majors on campus? And of course, is there anything in the works, anything in the pipeline, any new upcoming majors that students can look out for?
Sure. So I would say that the most popular areas in terms of, what students indicate on their common application, and again, they might change their mind because they're not choosing a major until their second year. But typically it's things in the biomedical sphere. So things like biomedical engineering, neuroscience, chemistry, biochemistry, and I think some of the draws of Rochester are that you can study that at the undergraduate level, and we're doing research on the River campus, on our main undergraduate campus in those areas, and we can work with graduate students and all of that. We also have the School of Medicine and Dentistry right across the street. You cross the stoplight and it's right there. And they are doing cutting edge research, with their physicians and at the medical school. And undergraduates can actually do shadowing at the hospital. They can do research there. So, we're the kind of place where we've developed vaccines, like the Gardasil vaccine, and or during COVID, we were one of maybe 10 colleges that was able to test the COVID vaccinations when they were going into production. So, if you're a student interested in public health and vaccine development and medicine, these amazing opportunities to apply that in a real way. And to really be immersed in that. And about 75% of our students get into medical school, who go through pre-med at Rochester, by the way. So I'd say biomedical is a big one. And then after that, engineering, just in general, whether it's mechanical engineering, computer science, but even within engineering, you have the ability to customize what you're studying and to even create your own sort of program. So you can either choose an ABET accredited engineering path, follow that kind of standard path, or maybe you don't necessarily want to pursue a license in engineering, but you have a topic in engineering that you really want to learn about. So like robotics is an example of that, where students do a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, it's sort of like a general engineering degree, and they choose their electives. They work with their faculty to make it sort of a program that makes sense for them and what their interests are. Um, so engineering, biomedical, business is a big one. At the graduate level, our Simon School of Business is typically ranked in the top 20 in the country. And not that rankings are everything, but I just mentioned that to say that at the undergraduate level, you're learning from all of those same professors. So those are your teachers, and you're working with those graduate students. And if you want to apply to an MBA at Rochester, you know a lot of the faculty on the entrance admissions committee, so that doesn't hurt as well. But so I think like a lot of colleges, sort of some of these programs that lead to professions, or that are kind of maybe some of the quote unquote the practical programs are popular. But that doesn't mean that we don't have amazing programs outside of STEM, outside of science. And I always like to make sure I want to mention those too. You know, we have things like archaeology, technology, and historic structures, which I think is so cool. Half of the faculty in that department are engineers, and the other half are archaeologists or anthropologists, you know, folks like that. And they might take their students to Rome and look at a bridge. And you've got some people focusing on the physics of the bridge and how it's still standing, and other people looking at you know, how it was used and how it's used now, and how that the social implications of having a bridge and that kind of thing. You know, we offer linguistics. People may not know that Rochester, it has one of the largest deaf and hard of hearing communities in the country. So ASL is very popular, you know, as a minor or a double major on our campus. Even something like medieval studies is one of our most popular minors. You know, so I think students want to explore. They might have one major that maybe is a little bit more on that practical side, although I hate to say that because every major has value, is useful, and unless you're pursuing a career that needs a license, you can study anything and still go to graduate school. And you know, so I want to underscore that as well. But we have students mixing and matching things all the time. In terms of new programs, I mean, there are always things in the works, but I always get excited by what the students are working on and creating. So I mentioned astrophysics before. I think another neat example is audio and music engineering. So there aren't many colleges that have that program. But at Rochester, we're kind of uniquely aligned to have that because we have the Eastman School of Music off campus, which is a world-class conservatory. They, you know, live, eat, and breathe music 24/7. They're one of the top conservatories in the world to study your craft. They are off campus, but they're about 10 minutes away. And we do have a dual degree with them, by the way, as well. But so we've got the Eastman students. We've got this amazing, you know, computer science and engineering program. And so putting that together, you know, we have students that they basically proposed that to be its own major. And then it became so popular that now that's a full major that you'll see in our course catalog. So I like to say, when you look at our 80+ undergraduate majors, that's just the start. And, you know, you can always study what you want. You can create your own things. And there's probably going to be new things added over the years, depending on the interest.
Right. No, fantastic, fantastic, right? And I know you mentioned, you know, a little while earlier that you know, students have, again, they have their option to, you know, they declare their major only later, and that there's no cap in terms of, you know, how many CS students, for instance, as you rightly pointed out, lots of students in this area are looking at those engineering, you know, and especially CS fields. And I know you mentioned a little earlier, Nick, that, you know, that's not how you evaluate applications, right? And there's no cap to anything at University of Rochester. So I was wondering if you can provide like a little bit of insight as to how an academic transcript is then evaluated, right? If we're not really looking at those pieces. Would you be able to share some of that?
Absolutely, yeah. So our admissions review is known as holistic. So it's not so cut and dry where we're just looking at a test score and a weighted GPA and maybe a couple other things, and that's that. There's so many factors. Academics, of course, are always going to be the most important thing. You know, we want to make sure that students that we feel that they're prepared. But recognizing that they might change their mind and that they should be prepared for a wide variety of classes. Um, so there's the academic piece to our admissions process. There is, and that's going to basically, I like to think, get the students' foot in the door. We're a selective place. Basically, the demand for our university is such that we have to turn away, we have to deny students who we know could do the work. We just don't have enough spots for all of them. So academics really just gets your foot in the door. And then beyond that, it's what kind of community member are you going to be? Are you going to be the kind of person that uplifts the people around you, that wants to make the world ever better? Our motto is Meliora, or ever better. And we talk about commitment to equity, leadership, integrity, openness, respect, and accountability. And those are things that we take seriously, that we look for in our admissions process. We look for that when we're reading students' essays, their recommendation letters. We have supplemental questions where we let students reflect on their values and identity and how that connects to our mission as an institution. We offer interviews. We're actually going to be having them in Seattle in October. So we pick students to go on our admissions webpage and look at interviews. They're for seniors, but and they can do them online virtually as well if the in-person dates don't work out. But we really value when students do those interviews. They're not required, but they're very useful for us in determining the student's character and the kind of person they're going to be on campus. And also getting a chance for them to really describe what they like to nerd out about and their academic passion and what they love. We have the application, we have the transcripts, but we want these other pieces, and that really helps students to stand out in our process. And then that third piece is, does the student seem like they have a genuine interest in Rochester? So this term, sort of like demonstrated interest, I think is floated a lot. And some colleges say they consider it and some say they don't. For us, we like to think of it as demonstrated understanding. So does the student really show that they're not just adding Rochester to their list because we're a selected college that maybe has their major, but they haven't done much more research beyond that. It's so easy to apply to colleges these days with a common application. You can just check a box and add a few more schools. And we know that on the admission side. So students that throughout the process and in different ways, we take notes on lots of different things. It could be their supplemental essays. It could be a phone call we have with them. It could be an interview. Do they show that they've done a little research on Rochester and they understand why they're thoughtful about why they're adding it to their list? So when those three pieces come together, students that show academic passion, challenging themselves, taking on rigor, they don't have to be a 4.0, but just that they have that drive and love of learning, and that they have sort of a baseline that we feel like they're going to be okay academically. Students that are going to be amazing community members and are going to make the world better. And students that really love Rochester are the students who tend to be admitted. And so looking at a transcript, basically we look at an unweighted GPA, and that's an important thing for us because we have students applying from all over the world, and every school is different. I mean, even in the US, there's no really standard GPA. We have schools that use a 5.0 scale. We have schools that might give an extra 0.2 weight to an honors class. Maybe they give an extra 0.4. So a weighted GPA in our minds is not an accurate way to evaluate, one student compared with the other. It's kind of an apples and oranges thing. So for us, we recalculate the GPA. We look at those academic courses, unless they're at the college level. So we might not look at a drawing class that's just out of the college prep level. That wouldn't factor into our recalculation. But if it's a AP drawing class, or AP art class, then sure, we'll look at that. And no student can go above a 4.0 with the way that we recalculate the GPA. So a lot of students come up to admissions reps and they'll say, "Oh, I'm a 4.5. I'm sorry, not for us." So we look at the GPA, and that helps us to determine how successful was a student in the classroom in terms of are they able to achieve A's, B's, C's? What was their performance like in the classroom? And now I know a lot of families hear that and they think, well, wait a minute, what about the kid that had, the full IB diploma versus the kid that didn't, and they have similar GPAs? We do still take it into account, but instead of looking at a weighted GPA to determine that, we have sort of a scale. We get to know our schools. We like to get to know our counselors. We look at every high school has something called a profile. where, they talk about what do we offer at the school? Do we offer APs? Do we offer IBs? How many of these classes can you take? Are there any limits on what you can take? Are there special magnet programs or running start, things like that? So we kind of have that context going in, and we try to understand what's available to the student in their environment, and with what was available to them, how much did they challenge themselves? How much rigor did they take on? And we sort of have a scale in our admissions process, and we use our judgment. And we basically say, this student took on the most rigorous curriculum available to them, somewhat rigorous, not so rigorous. It's kind of similar to what counselors can evaluate the students on when they submit their school report. There are multiple people looking at your application at Rochester, so it's not just me. I do read all of the applications from the Northwest, but there will also be other people doing a second read. We might go to committee. So it's not just me making this determination on the rigor, and really any of these categories. We have kind of these checks and balances. But I think, in my mind, this is a more fair system because it allows us to take into account the rigor of what's available in your school and how much in your context, in your environment, did you take on a challenge, and have a level playing field with the GPA so that if a student is applying from Nepal or London or Ohio, that they have that similar kind of evaluation and that they're treated in that fair kind of way. We're test optional. We take that seriously. So we will not consider scores. We only want to, see scores if students choose to submit them. And I think sometimes families say, well, if you don't submit the score, you're going to think that I'm not, I had low scores. We're not scrutinizing it to that degree. We're not thinking of things that way. We don't think scores are the best predictor of how well you're going to do at Rochester. We looked at our own data, and it's not as predictive as the GPA and just your performance in the classroom. So, we recognize that there are students that study for years for the tests, and they are proud of their scores, and we want to give them the ability to submit them if they're proud of them. But we will never hold it against a student if you don't submit scores. And then with that, we also are test flexible. So if you choose to submit the scores, it's up to you what kinds of scores you submit and how many of them. So maybe you want to submit the SAT, but not the ACT. Maybe you want to submit both. Maybe you want to submit your subject test scores, like the AP or the IB exam results. So you can submit those kinds of tests either in addition or in lieu of something like the SAT or the ACT. Because whatever the student is proud of and thinks is representative of their ability to do well, we want you to be able to share that. In addition, we also allow students to submit a supplement that could either be like a research abstract or a portfolio or a creative piece. Maybe if they're interested in audio music engineering, they want to submit a song that they created on the computer. Maybe if they're interested in medicine, they want to submit a journal article that they were involved in. We have a number of students that would submit, journal articles from Seattle Children's or, things that they've been involved in the Northwest. So we really try to allow students and give them multiple options to highlight what they think is special about them academically. So we have the kind of the baseline, but then allow students to kind of go above and beyond and submit other kinds of things as well with that academic portion of the review.
And thank you for all that insight, Nick, because I think you automatically address a lot of questions that I typically get asked. And so I love how you already addressed so many of those questions, right? And it sounds to me as you're describing this that, how we spoke about the curriculum at University of Rochester being flexible, it sounds like you've inbuilt a huge part of this even in the application process, right? And that's so representative. And sometimes that's what I will tell students is that just by looking at the kinds of questions that are being asked, right? The supplemental questions in the application, that in itself will open more doors of understanding, and you're going to understand so much more about the university based on the kinds of questions they're asking you and how they want you to apply, right? And I think that was just super representative of what University of Rochester, the kind of experience you're going to have at University of Rochester as well, right? And I
Thank you.
know we're absolutely running out of time. I wish I could sit here and talk to you so much more about this, right? But I want to be respectful of your time as well. And I also know I just want to hit upon one last piece, which we discussed earlier, Nick. If you can, would you be able to share a little bit about what the vibe is on campus, right? And yeah, because I know academically, I think, students and families are going to be happy, but I'm sure they want to know, what's it like to be a student there? Do you have any
Absolutely.
insights on that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I mentioned that, I just started working for Rochester a little over a year ago. And so the first time that I visited campus and I took the tour, I was struck by how much time we were spending in the library. At my former college, the library, we maybe went in there for 15 minutes. We like, these are the stacks, these are the collections, here's a space where you can study, move on to the next building, right? And at Rochester, it felt like we kept weaving in and out of it, and we kept seeing all these different areas. We saw the maker spaces and 3D printers. We saw a portion of the library where students, every few years, they do a survey, and the students actually design what the library looks like, what kinds of chairs and whiteboards and equipment they have and how it's configured. We saw students in social areas hanging out, having snacks, sharing pizza, studying together in groups. And then we saw the kind of regal, quiet-looking areas, the Harry Potter-looking part of the library, and the stained glass, and very quiet in there, that kind of thing too. And of course, we saw lots of other facilities, but the library is in the center of the campus. There's 6 or 7 of them. Many of them are connected to each other. The stacks, there's thousands and thousands of books, and they rise high above the campus into a tower that overlooks everything. And I think that's just a great metaphor for our campus. It's a pretty studious place. We have these students that love learning. And so they're going to spend a lot of time in the library. And it doesn't just have to be the quiet study area, but all of the ways that you can explore learning and collaborating with others, you're going to find it in that space. And you kind of almost have to go through the library, especially if you want to use our underground tunnels when it snows outside. Fun fact about Rochester, we have tunnels. To get to different buildings and that kind of thing. So I thought that was a pretty cool metaphor. I also visited our interfaith center, and I thought that was really neat as well. We're not a religious institution, but we have students coming from all over the world, and there are so many backgrounds and identities, including different religious identities that are, being practiced on campus. So that's just a really beautiful space right on the Genesee River. The campus is actually on a former golf course. We date back to 1850, but we've had a few different campuses within the city of Rochester as we've grown. So we own a lot of space. We're an urban campus, and so we're classified as urban. And it's an open campus, but we have lots of room to spread out. There's lots of lawns, these brick buildings, the ivy on the buildings, and that kind of thing. It's that really beautiful, classic-looking college campus. I like to mention for students from the West that you're going to get all 4 seasons, and I think students like to focus on the snow, and they're a little worried about that, but that's just a part of it. The 4 seasons are all so vibrant. So people drive for hours to see the changing of the leaves, and the campus is so crisp and beautiful in the fall. You'll see our crew team out on the river, the Genesee River, right along, 3 sides of the campus that goes downtown. In the spring, the flowers are coming out. People are so excited to get outside. We date back to 1850, so we have festivals that correspond to all of the seasons. We do the tunnels I mentioned. We have a massive indoor athletic center. So, whether you want to run or play sports or whatever, you can do that indoors. We're DEEP-free. But actually club sports are the most popular at Rochester, which again is telling, right? So the library, the club sports, where things like Quidditch, like we've been national champions in that. Anybody can join. It's a full contact sport, by the way. So former football players will play it sometimes. I don't think students always realize that going in. So things that are collaborative in nature, things that where students can be a little competitive, but not cutting each other down. It's much more about collaboration. It's about fun kind of competition. It's about growing and learning and immersing yourself in different experiences and cultures and backgrounds in a beautiful place. And then finally, I'll just mention the city of Rochester. It's the 4th largest city in New York State. And it's a small city, so it feels less bustling than even like a downtown Seattle. But it really has all the opportunities that you would want in a big city. So, I mean, our museum, the Memorial Art Gallery, it's free for our students. It's considered the best collection of art outside of Manhattan in New York State. We have the Eastman School of Music that I mentioned. They have over 900 concerts a year, and many are free for our students. And students can actually even take free lessons at Eastman if they love music. We have all of these festivals going on throughout the city, and being a research university, you're going to interact in some way with the community. Maybe you're a psychology major and someone's coming in for an experiment, like our stress lab, for example. We hire undergraduates to put people into stressful situations so they can study that. And those might be community members. Maybe it's our hospital system. You're doing research, or you're shadowing a doctor. People are coming in and seeing their doctor in the community. Maybe you want to work with children. We have the Mount Hope Children and Family Center. So whatever the realm, you're in an urban environment and you're interacting with people in a real way. And the research that we do at Rochester impacts people in a real way. And it's a special part about going there. And one last thing, the airport's only 5 minutes from campus. It's super easy to get there. No direct flights from CFAC, unfortunately, but one layover and you're there pretty quickly. So I hope that students will give us a look, check us out. I'm always happy to talk to students. I'm based on the West Coast, so I'm in your time zone. That's part of why I'm out here. I'll be visiting the area in October. We also have a flying program as well. So for students that maybe have more of a financial need, it is application based, but that is a chance to come and see the campus, and we'll cover the expenses. And so you just make sure that you have a chance to actually see it and feel it before making that big commitment to go across the country for school. We understand that. So we want to try to give students that ability to really see and touch and feel the campus.
Right. And, again, thank you, Nick, for being so generous with your time and for sharing all those insights. It sounds like, anybody who wants anything, I think there's going to be a little piece that they're going to be able to find in Rochester, right? At University of Rochester. And it seems like there's something for everyone there, right? And, thank you again for this and for being here and for patiently answering, all these questions that we had for you. So appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for providing this opportunity to share about this university that I love. And I'm just so looking forward to working with you and the students in the future. So thanks again for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely, Nick.